Tonight's story begins, and I'm grateful you're here with me. These quiet mysteries feel different when we share them together. I'm your host, Davis, and before we step into the village lane, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? I read every comment, every place, every little note you leave, so thank you truly for joining this calm corner of the world. Now, let's begin. Early spring settled over Street Mary Mead with a quiet kind of softness. Nothing rushed. Nothing demanded attention. It was the sort of morning that moved in small steps, as if the day preferred to stretch before it fully woke. Miss Marple liked mornings like this. Simple. Predictable. Comfortable. She set her kettle on the stove. A gentle hiss rose. Not loud, just steady. A familiar sound that matched the gentle rhythm of her thoughts. While the water warmed, she opened her curtains. The lace shifted in a small wave. The village lane rested outside, calm, tidy, ordinary. A milk cart slowed near Mrs. Bantry's gate. A robin hopped along the stone edge by the church path. Everything seemed in its proper place. That always pleased her. She reached for her teacup. Blue porcelain. A faint crack near the handle. She noticed it every morning. Routine made it comforting. She poured the hot water, set the tea to steep, and adjusted the spoon beside the saucer. Everything quiet, everything familiar, everything as it had been yesterday. And then, something not quite right. Miss Marple paused. Her gaze drifted back toward the window. She wasn't sure at first what had caught her attention. No sound had startled her, no knock on the door, just a small shift. A detail out of place. The sign. The one outside the old clockmaker's shop. It leaned, slightly, just enough to draw the eye. Miss Marple narrowed her gaze, but gently. Curiosity rarely rushed her. She simply observed. The sign had hung straight since she was a girl. Mr. Groves, the clockmaker, had always been precise. Even after he retired, even after the shop closed, the sign never sagged. Not once. She sipped her tea, letting the warmth settle her thoughts. Perhaps the wind had nudged it. A small gust. Nothing serious. But she couldn't recall any wind last night. The branches outside her cottage had slept without movement. She remembered that clearly. Still, signs loosen with age. Wood shifts. Metal gives a little. She considered each possibility with slow, sensible logic. The sort of logic that never hurried and never guessed more than necessary. But the angle of that sign, it didn't look loosened. It looked disturbed, as if someone had pushed it. Not hard, just a touch, just enough to alter a line that had stayed straight for decades. She set her teacup down, gently, thoughtfully. People often overlooked tiny things, but tiny things had a way of revealing larger things. Miss Marple had learned that more times than she could count. A crooked curtain, a shifted vase, a misplaced glove, all small, all meaningful. Her gaze returned to the lane, calm, still. Nothing else appeared unusual. No rushing feet, no troubled voices, just a village morning beginning its quiet routines. And yet, the sign remained crooked, almost watching, almost waiting. Miss Marple folded her hands. Not worried, not startled, simply curious. "That's odd," she murmured, soft enough for only the kettle to hear. A tiny thing, a very tiny thing. But tiny things had a way of opening doors. And this one felt like a door just beginning to shift. She leaned closer to the window. Quiet, attentive. Something small had changed. And she meant to know why. The morning no longer felt entirely ordinary, and that was where the mystery began. Miss Marple stepped outside after finishing her morning tea. Her walk always began at the same time. Same path, same pace. A simple routine that kept her mind clear. She moved along the lane with quiet steps. Nothing unusual. A sparrow on the hedge. A bicycle leaning near the vicarage gate. Mrs. Price Ridley's cat sitting in its usual spot. All familiar. All steady. But as she reached the corner near the old post box, she slowed. Something caught her eye. Something small. Very small. A mark. in the soil by the path. Not deep, not messy, just precise enough to notice if one had the habit of noticing such things. She bent slightly, hands folded behind her back. A footprint. A woman's footprint. Narrow heel. Clean edge. Recent. Very recent. Miss Marple studied it without touching it. Early walkers were common in the village. Milk deliveries, bakers, gardeners. But this print did not match the usual patterns. Too neat, too deliberate, too out of place for this stretch of path. She glanced left, then right. No one nearby. No sound of shoes. No door just closing. Nothing to suggest who had passed. Her gaze returned to the soil. One print. Only one. No second step. No trail. Just a single impression beside the hedge. That made her pause. People rarely stop after one step. Not unless they reached for something, or leaned towards something, or hesitated. Miss Marple straightened. Her eyes drifted upward, and there she saw the latch. The small metal latch on the garden gate beside the footprint. Tilted. Not broken. Not forced. Just nudged out of its usual position, as if someone tested it. Lightly. Quickly. The gate belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher. Nice couple. Quiet. Careful with their things. Their gate never hung crooked, especially not in the morning. Miss Marple gave the latch a gentle touch. It moved too easily. Someone had checked it, not opened it, not entered, just checked. She stepped back. Let the details settle into her mind. She never rushed conclusions. Not her way. Tiny clues worked best when left to simmer. Still, one footprint. One shifted latch, both untouched by the morning routines. Someone had been here, someone who did not want to be seen. Miss Marple resumed her walk, calmly, thoughtfully, hands folded as before. She did not look back at the footprint. She did not need to. She had stored the detail. She would return to it later, when the pattern became clearer. For now, she simply walked on, with a small, soft spark of suspicion beginning to warm in her thoughts. Miss Marple reached Mrs. Penwood's cottage just after 10:30, a friendly hour. Not too early, not too late, a gentle time for a cup of tea. Mrs. Penwood welcomed her with a warm smile. "Such a quiet morning," she said. Her voice always carried a soft cheer. It made the cottage feel even more settled. Miss Marple removed her gloves, folded them neatly, placed them on her lap as Mrs. Penwood, poured the tea. Steady hands, slow movements, everything familiar. Except one thing, and Miss Marple noticed it at once. A small paper, folded sharply, tucked halfway beneath the sugar bowl, barely visible, almost hidden. Not the sort of paper one hides by accident. Not in a tidy cottage like this. Mrs. Penwood lifted the teapot again. Her hand trembled. Just a little, barely a flutter, but enough for Miss Marple to see. "Are you feeling quite well?" Miss Marple asked, gently. "Oh, yes," Mrs. Penwood replied a little too quickly. Too light, too dismissive. "I'm perfectly fine. Just a chill, perhaps." Miss Marple nodded. She didn't press. Pressing too soon clouded things. Letting details settle worked better. They sipped their tea, warm, steady, comforting. Mrs. Penwood chatted about ordinary things. The baker's new delivery boy, the church flowers, the hens in Mrs. Fletcher's yard. All simple, all pleasant. But her eyes drifted, again and again, toward the sugar bowl, toward the hidden paper. Miss Marple followed her gaze subtly, then looked back at her teacup. She kept her breathing calm, her manner light. "Did you hear about the crooked sign?" Miss Marple asked. "Oh, that old thing," Mrs. Penwood said, waving her hand. Another tremor, slight, quick, but clear. "I'm sure it's nothing." Nothing, a favorite village word, used often, rarely accurate. Mrs. Penwood reached for the sugar bowl. Her fingers brushed the folded paper. She froze, just for a second, then moved on. Miss Marple placed her teaspoon down, gently, deliberately. "I always admire how neat your table is," she said. A simple sentence, but she watched the reaction. Mrs. Penwood hesitated, then smiled. A thin smile, not her usual one. "Thank you, dear. I try my best." Miss Marple's gaze drifted once more to the paper. A corner stuck out. White, sharp, pressed flat by intention, not chance. She didn't ask about it. Not yet. The moment wasn't ready. Instead, she finished her tea, slowly, letting the silence settle between them, comfortable, but edged with something unsaid. When she rose to leave, Mrs. Penwood stood quickly, too quickly, as if eager, or relieved. "Do come again," she said. Her smile returned, but the tremor stayed. Miss Marple stepped outside, closed the gate behind her, walked a few quiet steps, then paused. One tremor, one dodged question, one hidden paper. Small things, very small. But small things, she knew, often opened into larger truths. A soft domestic clue was rising now, and it was only the beginning. The Women's Institute met at 11, a small gathering, familiar faces, predictable voices, the sort of meeting where nothing loud ever happened, yet everything important was whispered. Miss Marple entered quietly, a nod here, a gentle smile there. She chose her usual seat near the window. Mrs. Bantry spotted her first. "Ah, Miss Marple," she said, waving. "I was just telling the ladies about the postman being late again. Most. Unusual." Miss Hartnell leaned in. "Late twice in 1 week," she added. Her tone carried just enough interest to suggest concern, but not enough to alarm anyone. Typical village balance. Miss Marple folded her hands. "Oh? That is unusual." She didn't overreact. She didn't rush. She let the comment settle. "Mrs. Price," Ridley tutted. "Not just late. He's changing his route times. My letter from my cousin in Torquay arrived at 9:30. It never arrives at 9:30. Miss Marple nodded. Mail timings rarely shifted without reason, but she waited for the next detail. There was always a next detail. "And, Mrs." Bantry continued, lowering her voice, "someone said they saw a light on inside the old clockmaker's shop last night." Miss Hartnell gasped softly. "Oh, surely not. The shop's been closed for months." Yes, Mrs. Bantry said, but Mrs. Ellaby saw it as she passed. A faint one, not a lamp, more like a quick flicker." Miss Marple felt the familiar stir of curiosity. A crooked sign, a flickering light, unusual mail timings, separate threads. Maybe nothing, maybe something. "And I'll tell you something else, Mrs. Price," Ridley added, leaning forward. "I walked by the Fletchers' garden early this morning. Their gate was open. Just an inch, but open, and they never leave it open." Miss Marple kept her posture calm. An open gate, a shifted latch, one footprint. The pattern gathered quietly. Not loud, not urgent, just forming. "Mrs." Bantry poured tea. The sound softened the room. "Do you think something's going on?" she asked in a light whisper. "People seem uneasy. Even Mrs. Penwood was acting strange at the grocer's." She dropped her purse twice. Miss Hartnell nodded. She looked tired, and she kept glancing over her shoulder. Miss Marple took her teacup, warm in her hands, comforting, steadying. "People do behave oddly when worried," she said. A simple statement. True enough. But she knew worry rarely came without cause. The ladies continued chatting. More small details. Nothing sharp, nothing heavy. Just little pieces scattered through the conversation. Lights at odd hours. Mail arriving late. A cat refusing to go into the garden. Someone seen hurrying along the lane at dusk. Tiny things. Too tiny for fuss. Perfect for thought. Miss Marple listened. Collected. Connected. Quietly. When the meeting ended, she rose with the others. A soft smile. A polite farewell. But as she stepped outside, she paused on the threshold. The March air felt still. Too still. She folded her gloves. Looked once down the lane, her mind piecing the smallest patterns together. "This is stranger than I thought," she murmured. The mystery had begun to breathe. Miss Marple decided to visit Mrs. Penwood again, not to pry, just to see how she was. Concern flowed better when it moved gently. She arrived in the early afternoon, a polite hour. She knocked lightly. The door opened slower than usual. Mrs. Penwood stood there. Her smile tried to form, but it wavered. Not much, just enough to notice. "Miss Marple," she said softly. Her voice carried a thin edge. "Not fear yet, but close. Do come in." Miss Marple stepped inside. The cottage felt the same. Neat, calm. But something had shifted. A quiet tension, like a thread pulled one stitch too tight. Mrs. Penwood fussed with the teacups. Her hands weren't steady. The tremor returned, subtle, quick, real. "Are you sure you're well?" Miss Marple asked. "Oh, yes, dear," Mrs. Penwood answered. Too quickly, too brightly. Just a busy morning. But her eyes told another story. She avoided meeting Miss Marple's gaze. She turned her face away whenever certain topics approached the edge of the conversation. Miss Marple noticed a small sewing box on the table, the lid half open. A spool tipped over. A pair of scissors resting oddly sideways. Not sharp, just out of place. Mrs. Penwood saw Miss Marple glance toward it. Her reaction was immediate and telling. She flinched. A small movement, barely a breath. But it happened. Miss Marple looked down at her tea. She didn't question it yet. Not her way. Questions asked too soon shut doors. Quiet patience opened them. "I saw Mrs. Bantry this morning," Miss Marple said. "She mentioned the post being late." Mrs. Penwood froze for a second. Her fingers tightened around the teapot handle. The tremor increased. "Oh, did she?" Her voice thinned again, almost faded. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes, and someone mentioned a light in the clockmaker's shop." Mrs. Penwood inhaled sharply. Not loud, not obvious. But there, the teapot wobbled in her hand. A drop spilled. She quickly dabbed it with a cloth. Her hand shook again. Miss Marple folded her hands in her lap. Calm. Still. "Are you quite certain?" "Everything is all right." Mrs. Penwood looked up. Her eyes darted toward the cupboard, then back to Miss Marple, then away again. "I'm just tired," she whispered. "Tired from things?" "From what things?" Miss Marple asked gently. Mrs. Penwood opened her mouth, closed it, forced a weak smile. "Oh, nothing important. Truly nothing. Nothing. The most dangerous word in the village." Mrs. Penwood stood abruptly. "I should fetch more sugar," she said, though the bowl was still half full. She walked to the cupboard with unsteady steps. Miss Marple watched her, quietly, thoughtfully, avoided topics, flinching at small objects, a trembling hand, eyes that never rested, not nerves, not exhaustion, fear, clear as a printed line. Miss Marple rose from her chair, soft, steady. She touched Mrs. Penwood's arm lightly. "My dear," she said in a low, gentle voice, "someone has frightened you." Mrs. Penwood froze. Her breath caught. Her eyes widened. Miss Marple had recognized it now. Not worry, not confusion, fear. And fear always pointed to something, or someone, a truth, waiting just beyond the next step. The village fete took place on the green. A simple affair, tables of jam, a few knitted scarves, a tray of raffle tickets. Nothing loud, nothing unusual. Miss Marple liked the quiet hum of it. Polite chatter, light footsteps, calm movements. Exactly what a village fete should be. She greeted Mrs. Bantry first, then Mrs. Hartnell, then the vicar's wife. Everyone cheerful, everyone familiar. Then she noticed Mrs. Penwood standing near the craft table, alone, hands clasped too tightly, shoulders held too still, a fixed smile that didn't match her eyes. Miss Marple approached slowly, no sudden steps. She didn't want to startle her. "Such a lovely morning," Miss Marple said. "Yes," Mrs. Penwood replied, her voice thin, almost brittle. "Very lovely." She tried to appear relaxed, but her fingers kept brushing the edge of her sleeve. A nervous habit, a quiet giveaway. On the table before her sat a collection of small tools, old gardening pieces, shears, trowels, a metal watering can with chipped paint, and one object more, a small hand rake, worn, rusty, harmless, but placed awkwardly at the edge of the display. Mrs. Penwood saw it, and something inside her broke for a moment. Not visibly, not loudly, just a small shift in her breath. She stepped back, only an inch, almost nothing. Yet Miss Marple saw it as clearly as ink on paper. Mrs. Bantry noticed too. "Oh, my dear, are you all right?" she asked. Mrs. Penwood nodded too fast. Yes, just a little warm. Warm was not the problem, not even close. Miss Marple studied the rake. Small, ordinary, but its position mattered. Someone had placed it deliberately. Too close, too pointed, right where Mrs. Penwood would see it. Another villager approached. Mr. Fletcher, friendly man, kind eyes. He glanced at Mrs. Penwood, then at the rake, and frowned. "Odd place for that," he murmured. He reached to move it. Mrs. Penwood flinched. A sharp intake of breath. Barely a second, but real. Mr. Fletcher pulled back. "Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to trouble you." Mrs. Penwood forced a smile. "It's nothing." The word again. Light on the surface. Heavy underneath. Miss Marple stepped closer. Her voice soft. "You've had a shock, my dear." "No," Mrs. Penwood whispered, but the denial held no strength. Her eyes stayed fixed on the rake. Wide. Tense. People noticed now. Eyes turned. Soft murmurs rose. Polite. Curious. Concerned. Mrs. Penwood quickly excused herself. Walked away with short, tight steps. Almost hurried. Yet trying not to appear hurried. A revealing contrast. Miss Marple picked up the rake. Turned it gently. Examined the handle. One detail stood out. A faint mark. A small thread caught at the edge of the marded. Metal. A thread the same color as Mrs. Penwood's sleeve. Miss Marple set the rake down again. Slowly, thoughtfully. She watched Mrs. Penwood move through the crowd. Head low, shoulders tense, hands trembling. Something had frightened her deeply. Something connected to that small tool. Miss Marple folded her hands, her suspicion now clear. "She is hiding something," she murmured, and the truth was drawing nearer. Night settled over the village in its usual quiet way. No rush, no trouble. Just the soft calm that came after a long day of gentle talk and simple errands. Miss Marple prepared for bed. Her routine never changed. A cup of warm milk, a brief glance at the window latch, a small prayer. Then her bedside lamp turned low. She liked the stillness. It gave her thoughts room to breathe. But tonight, the stillness felt thinner, less certain, as if something waited behind it. She lay down, closed her eyes, listened to the quiet, and then it came. A sound. Small, unexpected. A light tap against her garden gate. Not loud, not urgent. Just enough to pull her eyes open again. She sat up, calmly. She listened longer. Another tap. Then a pause. Then a soft creak. The gate. The same gate she checked each evening. Always latched. Always steady. Now shifting in the dark. Miss Marple slipped on her knitted shawl. Moved to the window. Slow steps. No hurry. Careful thought in every movement. She lifted the curtain only an inch. Just enough to see the garden path. Footsteps. Faint. Measured. Moving along the hedge. Not fast. Not confident. Testing the ground. Testing the silence. She couldn't see the person. Only the shadow. Slim. Close to the hedge. Trying to stay hidden. Miss Marple stayed very still. Stillness often revealed more than movement. The figure paused near her rose bed, bent slightly, as if searching for something, or leaving something. Then a voice. Low, barely shaped, a whisper carried by the smallest breath. She couldn't hear the words, only the tone. Soft, secretive, careful. The figure straightened again, turned toward the lane, took 3 steps, then stopped. A crack sounded. A twig. Small. Quick. The figure stiffened, looked back toward her gate, then hurried off, not running, but retreating with purpose. Miss Marple watched the shadow disappear into the darker stretch of the lane. She waited, counted slowly to 10, then 20. No return, no second voice, no more sounds. She lowered the curtain, her mind calm, but alert now. Something had shifted tonight, something definite. She moved to her front door, checked the latch, secure, as she expected. Then she opened the sitting room curtain slightly, looked at the garden once more, and she saw it, a small shape near the path, dropped, unplanned, left behind, a button, dark fabric, caught in the moon's faint light, round, simple, but out of place. She fetched it, held it in her palm, cold, smooth, freshly torn from something. Someone had come too close tonight, too close for comfort, too close for chance. She closed her hand around the button. A quiet line passed through her thoughts. Someone was sending a message. A quiet one. A hidden one. And then she heard it. A final whisper from the lane. Soft. Thin. Barely a breath. I warned you. A soft whispered threat drifting into the night. And Miss Marple now knew the danger was no longer distant. It was here. Miss Marple stepped outside just after sunrise. She slept lightly the night before, not from fear, simply from thought. Thought had kept her awake more than shadows ever did. The button lay on her table now, a quiet reminder, a clue without context. And clues without context needed fresh air. So she began her walk, slow, steady. She reached her garden gate first. The latch looked normal. Straight, closed, but she touched it anyway. The metal shifted too easily, much too easily. Someone had tested it again. She knew the difference. Use left a familiar looseness. Disturbance left a different one. Sharper, more recent. This was recent, very recent. She walked down the path. Her eyes moved gently across the ground. The soil near the rose bed was uneven. Subtle, barely disturbed, but disturbed all the same. Miss Marple bent, hands behind her back, posture relaxed. She always examined the ground like this, with quiet intention. The soil had been pressed by a shoe, a single shape, not deep, someone careful, someone light on their feet, but the surface told more. A small drag, a shift to the side. Someone had knelt, or leaned, or reached for something. She checked the hedge next. Leaves slightly shifted. A small gap. Not torn. Not forced. Just a hand's width opened. Enough for someone to peer through. Or listen. She stood again. Looked toward the lane. Calm logic kept her paced. She never rushed steps. Then she saw it. A small object tucked beneath the lowest branch. Not hidden well. Just placed. Placed by someone who hoped darkness would keep it unseen. She crouched slowly, lifted the object with 2 fingers. A scrap of paper, folded twice, edges sharp, ink faint, only a few words. She read them without reaction. Not yet. Nothing more. No name, no mark, just the short message. Direct, precise, purposeful. She folded the scrap again, put it in her pocket. She would return to it later. Patterns grew better when given time. Her steps carried her toward the Fletcher's gate next. Yesterday she had seen the latch disturbed. Today she felt the same shift. A soft looseness. Not accidental. Not careless. Someone had touched this gate twice now. 2 mornings. 2 disturbances. Miss Marple breathed slowly. Clear. Soft. Unhurried. She checked the edge of the path. Another impression. Not a footprint this time. More like a knee. The soil showed a gentle dip. The sort made by someone crouching. She stood. Let the pieces settle together. A button dropped. A scrap left. A latch tested. Soil shifted. Gate disturbed. Someone had been moving carefully. Not wandering. Not passing by. Working with intention. watching, checking, and not only at night. This morning too. Miss Marple folded her hands, her voice quiet, barely above a whisper. This is no accident, and she knew the truth was beginning to lift its head. Miss Marple decided to stop by the vicarage that afternoon. A gentle visit, nothing formal. Just a polite check-in after a restless night. The vicar's wife welcomed her warmly. She always did. A cheerful woman, busy hands, soft voice. "Do come in, Miss Marple. I've just made a fresh pot." Miss Marple smiled. "Only a small cup, thank you." She removed her gloves, sat near the window. Let the conversation settle at its own pace. The vicar entered a moment later. Kind expression, a little flustered as usual. He nodded at Miss Marple. "Lovely to see you. Strange week, isn't it?" "Strange?" Miss Marple repeated gently. She let the word hang. People filled silence faster when it waited patiently. The vicar Saturday folded his hands. Yes, well, odd little things happening. Lights, footsteps, people uneasy. He hesitated, looked at his wife, then back at Miss Marple. "More talk than fact, I'm sure." His wife shook her head. "Talk often means something, dear. It doesn't come from nowhere." Miss Marple sipped her tea, calm, listening, collecting. Mrs. Fletcher arrived shortly after, a friendly visit of her own. She joined them with a small sigh. "Goodness, the village feels unsettled. Even our post was delivered early today. Much earlier. It startled me." "Earlier?" Miss Marple asked. "Yes, 7:30. He never comes at 7:30. Another timing shift. Late deliveries. Early deliveries. Unsteady routine. It's probably..." "Nothing," the vicar said, but he didn't sound convinced. He fiddled with his sleeve, looked toward the door as if expecting someone. Mrs. Fletcher leaned in a little. "You didn't hear this from me, but someone said they saw a figure outside the Penwood cottage last night." Miss Marple's eyes lowered slightly. Not surprised, not startled, just thoughtful. "A figure?" she asked softly. "Yes, moving near the hedge, very slowly, very close. They thought it might be a fox at first, but no, too upright." The vicar shifted in his seat. "These things grow in telling," he muttered. But he glanced at Miss Marple. He wanted her opinion without asking for it. Mrs. Fletcher continued. "And Mrs. Penwood looked worn this morning, pale. She dropped her shopping basket at the grocer's, didn't even pick it up right away." Miss Marple nodded. A small nod, measured, thoughtful. The vicar's wife added, "She seems frightened, truly frightened." Silence settled. Warm, heavy, honest. People didn't say fear easily. Not in Street Mary Mead, not unless it had weight. Miss Marple placed her teacup down, her hands steady, her voice even. Did she mention why? Mrs. Fletcher hesitated, a moment of quiet truth forming between her breaths. No, but she almost said something. She stopped herself, mid-sentence, almost as if someone might overhear. A secret, held tightly, pressed behind her eyes. Miss Marple felt the shift, like a thread pulling through fabric. Subtle, real. She rose gently, thanked everyone, left with a soft smile. But as she walked down the lane, her thoughts moved deeper, layered, quiet, certain. People were worried. Patterns were forming. Voices carried hints they didn't fully understand, and the pressure beneath it all was building quietly. Miss Marple decided to check on Mrs. Penwood once more, not to press her, just to offer company. Company often opened doors that questions kept shut. She knocked softly. This time the door opened slower. Mrs. Penwood's face looked drawn, her smile thin, her eyes unfocused, as if searching for something she had misplaced. "Miss Marple, I wasn't expecting anyone." Her voice trembled, more than before. Fear had settled deeper. It was clear now, clear enough to touch the air around her. "I won't stay long," Miss Marple said. "Only a little chat." Mrs. Penwood stepped aside, nervous, restless. Her hands kept smoothing her apron. A loop she repeated without realizing. They sat in the small sitting room. Quiet colours, quiet light, but tension clung to the corners. Miss Marple waited. The waiting did more work than questions ever could. Mrs. Penwood looked at her hands, then at the window, then back again. Finally, she spoke, very softly, barely a full voice. There was a letter. Miss Marple did not move. Her stillness helped the next words find shape. A letter that came early. Yesterday morning, Mrs. Penwood continued. No name on it, no return address, just my name in small script. She clasped her fingers tightly. It said someone would come. Someone I knew once. Someone who wasn't welcome. Miss Marple nodded slowly. Did it say why? Mrs. Penwood shook her head. No, only that I should keep quiet, and that I would understand when they arrived. A quiet chill passed through her words, though her tone stayed soft. Not dramatic, just troubled. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. And did someone visit? Mrs. Penwood swallowed. Yes. Her voice thinned. He came last night. She hesitated, then whispered. He stood at the hedge. He didn't knock. He didn't speak my name, but I knew it was him. Miss Marple's eyes lowered in thought. The man from the letter. Yes. Her hands trembled. He said only one thing. You owe me. And then he walked away. A simple sentence, but heavy with old history. Old ties. Old troubles. Miss Marple kept her voice steady. Did you know him well? Mrs. Penwood closed her eyes. For a time. Long ago. Before I came here. But he wasn't supposed to find me. She took a slow breath. There's more. Something I haven't told anyone. Miss Marple waited. Still. Patient. There's someone missing, Mrs. Penwood whispered. A person who was supposed to come this week. A friend. She never arrived, and I think he has something to do with it. Silence settled. Not dramatic, just full. Full enough to reshape the room. Miss Marple folded her hands. The thread now had a direction. A letter. A visitor. A threat. A missing person. And one quiet truth rising beneath it all. A new clue had shifted everything, and the pattern was no longer scattered. It was beginning to point. Night returned with its usual quiet steps, calm on the surface, still in the lanes. But Miss Marple felt a shift beneath it, a quiet tension, a thin thread pulling tighter. She prepared for bed as she always did. Simple steps, steady movements. Her shawl folded, her lamp lowered, her window checked. But the air carried a different weight tonight. Not fear, just expectation. The sense that something unfinished would seek attention again. She sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, listened deeper. Then it came. A sound. Soft, deliberate, not like the taps from before. This one carried intention. A firm touch against wood. The gate. Her gate. The same gate disturbed in the morning. The same latch tested more than once. She rose quietly, moved to the window, opened the curtain a fraction. Not enough to be seen, just enough to see. The gate hung crooked. Not gently this time, not nudged, pulled. One side bent outward, a clean shift. Someone had forced it, not with violence, but with purpose. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the garden. Slow, methodical, thorough. A shadow moved near the hedge, not close, not bold, careful. The figure paused, listened, then stepped deeper onto her path. A hush wrapped the garden. No wind, no other movement, just this one presence. Measured, intentional. Miss Marple stayed perfectly still. Stillness often revealed what movement hid. The figure leaned toward her rose bed, knelt, touched the soil, as if searching for something placed earlier, or checking that something remained hidden. Then the figure spoke. Not loudly, not sharply. A whisper shaped with unsettling care. Penwood. Just the name. No more. A simple word but carrying weight. A warning wrapped inside it. A reminder. Miss Marple felt the meaning settle. A name whispered in her garden was no accident. A message delivered without envelope or ink. The figure rose again, turned slightly, listened once more, then whispered a second line. "She'll stay quiet, or she'll regret it." Calm tone. No haste, no anger, just certainty. Cold certainty hidden beneath the soft whisper. The figure slipped away, moved along the hedge, vanished into the dark lane with careful steps. Miss Marple lowered the curtain, her mind clear, her breath steady. She checked the gate once more from the inside. It leaned sharply now. Hinge strained. Latch bent. No doubt remained. Someone had come with intention. Someone had delivered a threat. Not loud, not chaotic, but real. Very real. She sat in her chair, hands folded, thoughts settling into their places, pieces aligning, not fully, but closer. The pattern tightened. The danger edged forward, and Miss Marple knew time was no longer gentle, no longer patient. Time was short. Miss Marple rose early, earlier than usual, calm, certain, purpose settling into her steps. She wrapped her shawl neatly. No rush, no tension, just a quiet readiness. The night had spoken. The whisper still rested in her thoughts. Not frightening, simply clear, clear enough to act. She stepped into the lane. The morning light was pale, soft, steady, a fitting backdrop for quiet investigation. Her first stop was her own gate. She examined the hinge, bent slightly, not broken, but pressed in a way that showed intention. She touched the latch. Loose again, more than yesterday. Not age, not wear. Hands had worked it, recent hands. She noted the pressure marks, small, sharp, aligned with careful force. She walked toward Mrs. Penwood's cottage next. Slow steps, observant eyes, her mind replaying each detail gathered so far. The footprint, the shifted latch, the hidden paper, the rake, the whispered warning, pieces drifting closer, never loud, never dramatic, just forming lines in her thoughts. She reached the Fletcher's gate, checked it gently. The latch there showed the same looseness, same direction of pressure, same faint scrape. Someone had circled this area more than once. Same path, same intention. She continued to the hedge where she found the scrap the day before. She knelt, hands behind her back, her eyes narrowed with quiet focus. The soil held new marks, light impressions. A knee, a shoe, a hand pressed against the ground. Someone had returned, not long after the whisper in her garden. Checking, watching, confirming. Miss Marple stood again, her face calm, her thoughts active, not hurried, not shaken. She walked toward the old clockmaker's shop, its sign still crooked, perhaps more so today. She studied the angle, the tilt. Someone had touched it again. 2 disturbances, 2 different mornings. Not random, not careless. She pressed the wood lightly. It shifted with ease. Too much ease. Someone had been signaling, or marking, or checking a vantage point. She returned to the lane, her steps deliberate, measured, thoughtful. Mrs. Penwood's cottage came into view, curtains drawn unevenly. Another clue, small, but meaningful. A person under pressure rarely closed curtains evenly. Hands shook, thought wavered, fear touched the edges of routine. Miss Marple paused at the gate, listened for a moment. Nothing moved inside, no voices, no steps. She didn't knock, not today, not yet. A frightened person needed space before truth could settle. Instead, she walked on. Let the lane guide her back toward her own cottage. Let her thoughts weave the pattern in silence. She sat in her chair at last, hands folded, eyes calm, her mind connecting each small clue, each tiny shift, each whispered threat. The pattern grew clearer now, not finished, but forming. Quiet, certain, real. She exhaled softly. The words rose in her mind with steady weight. The truth is forming. and she knew the next steps would reveal what hid behind the careful shadows. Miss Marple returned to Mrs. Penwood's cottage the next morning. She felt the time was right now, not to confront, just to observe. One final detail, the sort of detail that appears when someone reaches the edge of their fear. She knocked gently. No reply. She waited, knocked again. At last, the door opened. Mrs. Penwood looked tired, eyes shadowed, hands unsteady, but she let Miss Marple in with a weak smile. "Sorry, I didn't sleep well." "That's understandable," Miss Marple said softly. She stepped into the small sitting room. Everything looked tidy, almost too tidy. Fear often made people tidy what didn't need tidying. Miss Marple, Saturday Mrs. Penwood sat opposite her. The silence stretched, not awkward, just full enough for truth to loosen its hold. "I keep thinking about that visitor," Mrs. Penwood whispered. Her hands twisted her apron. "He's not someone I ever wish to see again." Miss Marple nodded with a slow, patient rhythm. "And he said you owed him something." "Yes." Her voice trembled. "Something from long ago. Something I hoped had been forgotten." Miss Marple didn't push, didn't pry. Let the stillness speak first. Her eyes slipped toward the table. A small sewing basket sat there, opened halfway, not neatly, as if closed in a hurry. And inside it, a glove. A single glove. Dark color. Men's size. Not Mrs. Penwood's. It lay half-hidden beneath a scrap of thread. Miss Marple saw it at once. Small things rarely escaped her. She reached not for the glove, but for the thread beside it. A simple movement. Polite. Gentle. "Is someone helping you sew these days?" she asked lightly. "Mrs." Penwood looked sharply at the basket. Her breath caught. "No, that's not mine." Her voice thinned again, almost vanished. Miss Marple lifted the edge of the glove. Just a little. Not enough to intrude. Just enough to confirm. A stain near the wrist. Not dramatic. Just a mark. A faint smear of soil. The same soil from Miss Marple's hedge. The same soil from the disturbed patch. "Mrs." Penwood's eyes widened. She pressed her hands together. "He must have dropped it last night, when he—" She couldn't finish. Miss Marple waited. Let her breathe. Let her gather the strength to continue. "There was also something else," Mrs. Penwood whispered. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a small slip of paper, folded, worn from worrying fingers. "I found this outside the door this morning." Miss Marple unfolded it gently. It was a receipt, simple, plain, from a shop in the next village, dated 2 days ago. A single item listed. Spare key cut. Miss Marple felt the quiet click in her mind. A soft, complete sound. Not dramatic, just certain. A puzzle piece sliding into its place. Someone had prepared access. To her gate. To the Fletcher's gate. To Mrs. Penwood's home. Everything aligned now. The visitor. The nights. The threats. The soil. The whispers. The missing friend. And now the key. The final clue had surfaced. And the motive waited just behind it. The last puzzle piece clicked into place. Miss Marple knew the moment had come. Not the final moment, just the gathering one. The moment when quiet truths needed quiet company. She wrapped her shawl, stepped into the lane, calm, steady, certain in her purpose. Her first stop was Mrs. Penwood's cottage. A gentle knock, a soft greeting. "Would you join me for a short meeting?" Mrs. Penwood hesitated, then nodded. Fear still touched her eyes, but trust rested beneath it. Next, Miss Marple walked to the Fletchers. Mrs. Fletcher opened the door before she could knock twice. "Oh, Miss Marple, I wondered if you might come." Her hands twisted in her apron. She looked tired, concerned, but ready. Miss Marple spoke lightly. "I'd like to gather a few of us. Nothing alarming, just a small conversation." Mrs. Fletcher agreed at once. People trusted Miss Marple when her voice carried that calm firmness. Then she visited Mrs. Bantry, and the vicar's wife, and the vicar himself. Each responded with the same mixture of curiosity and quiet worry. They knew something was stirring. They didn't know what. But they trusted Miss Marple to shape it gently. Within the hour, they gathered in the small reading room at the vicarage, a peaceful space. Simple chairs, a modest fire, calm surroundings, just enough comfort to soften the tension. The group sat in a loose circle, not too close, not too far, everyone polite, everyone trying to hide the unease in their posture. Mrs. Penwood sat slightly apart, hands clasped tightly, her shoulders drawn inward. She avoided looking at the glove in her basket. She avoided looking at the door. Mrs. Fletcher watched her with quiet concern. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Uncertainty held her still. The vicar cleared his throat, only once, softly, then folded his hands to stop them from fidgeting. Mrs. Bantry glanced between the faces, her eyes alert, thoughtful. She felt the tension, but didn't comment on it. Not yet. Miss Marple stood near the small table, her expression calm, her eyes thoughtful. She took her time, let the room settle. She glanced at each person gently, measured their breathing, their posture, their readiness. All carried their own quiet worry. All knew more than they had said aloud. "Thank you all for coming," Miss Marple said softly, her voice steady, warm, but with a firmness beneath it. "I know the last few days have felt unsettled." No one spoke. Silence accepted her words. She continued, "There have been small signs, footsteps, disturbances, strange visits, objects left behind, and someone among us has been threatened." Mrs. Penwood lowered her head. "Mrs." Fletcher reached out a cautious hand toward her. Miss Marple let the moment breathe. She did not rush the next line. She waited until the quiet felt full. Then she said, in a gentle but firm tone, "It's time to explain." The room held its breath. The truth waited at the threshold. Miss Marple stood in the quiet reading room, every face turned toward her, not frightened, just waiting, waiting for sense to settle, waiting for someone to shape the loose threads. She folded her hands. Her voice came soft, measured, even. "Let us begin at the start," she said. "A crooked sign, a shifted latch, a footprint, a scrap of paper. Small things, but small things rarely stay small." The room stayed still, only soft breathing, only gentle attention. Miss Marple continued, "Someone has been moving through the village with great care, not rushing, not fumbling, checking gates, watching windows, testing routines." Mrs. Penwood lowered her eyes. She understood the pattern now. She had lived inside it for days without knowing its shape. Miss Marple spoke gently. "The soil disturbed near my head showed someone kneeling, a person who knew they must remain low. Hidden," the mark repeated near the Fletchers, "and again near your garden, Mrs. Penwood." A small gasp escaped Mrs. Fletcher. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes." He circled more than once. He returned to confirm that his message had settled. "I believe he wished to be seen just enough. Not fully, just enough." She looked at Mrs. Penwood with kind eyes. "And the letter you received, that was the beginning. A warning. Not to the village, to you." Mrs. Penwood's hands trembled. "I tried to forget it," she whispered. "I know," Miss Marple said softly. "But worry leaves its own trail." Curtains closed unevenly. Lights left on longer than usual. Steps that hesitated a familiar door. The vicar swallowed quietly. "Who is he?" he asked. Miss Marple answered in her calm, thoughtful tone. "A man from Mrs. Penwood's past. Someone who believes he is owed something. Someone who followed her here after many years. He planned his approach with care. The spare key shows preparation. The glove shows his presence. The whispers show his purpose." Mrs. Penwood whispered, "He wants money." Miss Marple nodded. "Yes, and he intended to frighten you until you agreed." Mrs. Bantry's voice came soft. "But the missing friend?" Miss Marple paused gently. Not harmed, simply delayed. He used her expected visit as a threat. He implied he had already reached her, but he had not. A wave of quiet relief passed through the room. Miss Marple continued. The pattern is simple once settled. A man arrives in secrecy, leaves warnings, creates fear, checks the gardens, watches the windows, and waits for panic to shape your decisions. Mrs. Penwood pressed her hands together. Tears gathered but did not fall. I should have told someone sooner. Miss Marple stepped closer, her voice warm, understanding. No, my dear, fear isolates, but truth brings people back together. Silence wrapped the room, soft, accepting, and every face showed the same quiet understanding. The explanation had settled, and with it came quiet acceptance. The village softened in the days that followed. Not suddenly, not all at once, just gently, bit by bit, as if the lanes themselves exhaled. People moved with quieter steps, lighter glances, their voices felt steadier, less strained. The tension that once clung to every doorway drifted away like a forgotten worry. Mrs. Penwood walked to the grocer's again, slowly, carefully, but without that old trembling in her hands. Her eyes held a little more focus, a little more steadiness. Trust returning in small, careful pieces. Miss Marple met her at the corner. No questions, just a warm nod, a simple greeting, enough to remind her she was not alone. The vicar passed by as well, offered a polite smile, a short blessing, nothing dramatic, just presence, quiet presence that helped settle the last loose edges of fear. Mrs. Fletcher sent over a small basket of scones, lightly wrapped, still warm. The gesture said more than words could, a gentle signal that the village had returned to its usual rhythm. Inside Miss Marple's cottage, the kettle hissed softly, a familiar sound, a steady comfort. She moved with unhurried grace, cup, saucer, a touch of sugar, all in their rightful places. She carried her tea to the sitting room, placed it beside a small object resting on the table. The glove, cleaned now, folded neatly, a reminder of the quiet trouble that had passed. Not frightening, just meaningful. A symbol of how small clues, when noticed, could protect an entire village. Miss Marple looked at it for a moment, not with concern, only reflection. She had seen many clues like it through the years. Different shapes, different intentions, but always the same pattern underneath. People in need, people afraid, people reaching for help in indirect ways. She sipped her tea, warm, steady. Outside she heard children laughing, soft footsteps, a bicycle bell, the natural sounds of normal life returning to its usual shape. Mrs. Bantry's voice drifted faintly from across the lane, talking about roses, discussing ribbons. Little domestic things that were once overshadowed by worry, now restored, now simple again. Miss Marple set her cup down. Her eyes remained on the glove. She reached out, closed the sewing basket around it, not to hide it, just to give it rest. Every story deserved a quiet drawer at its end. She stood, checked her window latch, straightened a small, framed picture on the wall. Normal tasks, normal movements, each one carrying a soft echo of calm. She stepped outside for a moment. The lane felt gentle again, even, balanced. People waved. People smiled. Nothing forced, nothing heavy. She looked down the lane with her usual thoughtful gaze, not searching for danger, just appreciating stillness. The village had settled, the worry had softened, and every cottage felt a little lighter, a little warmer. Miss Marple breathed in quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Peace returns, and it truly had. And so, another quiet mystery settles for the night. Thank you for sharing this gentle journey with me. Before we close the pages, tell me, what moment caught your attention tonight? I'm always curious which small detail stays with you, and where are you listening from? Your messages from every corner of the world mean more than you know. This little community feels warmer because of you, so thank you, truly. Rest well, stay cozy, and keep your kettle close. Tomorrow, another kettle will boil. A single light glows in a cottage window. Soft, steady. The quiet lane rests beneath it, untouched and calm. Inside, a small clock ticks with its gentle, familiar rhythm. No urgency, no worry. Just the sound of ordinary life settling again. A curtain shifts lightly, as if the room itself exhales. Night wraps the village in peaceful stillness. Nothing stirs now. The story folds closed, fade to calm.